The Paper Mario series has been around for a very long time now, starting with the original N64 game that started it all from the developers of Intelligent Systems. The series was a spiritual successor to Super Mario RPG on the SNES, with a brand new art style to make everything look like a pop-up book, making this one of the timeless-looking N64 games. With the enjoyable RPG mechanics, the fun and colorful characters, and an adventure that makes the Mushroom Kingdom feel more alive than ever, this game is definitely my personal favorite Paper Mario game. Because this is one of those games that really gave me a true cozy vibe when I'm playing it. But after the critical and commercial success, once Nintendo pulled out the Nintendo GameCube, Intelligent Systems went on to work on a sequel. This game finally released in 2004 entitled Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. Now Paper Mario 64 was already a critical hit, but The Thousand Year Door was universally acclaimed as one of the best RPGs Nintendo has ever made, and probably the best Mario RPG in general. It is definitely the most influential game Intelligent Systems has made right next to Fire Emblem Awakening, so with all of this critical and commercial success, the Paper Mario series was pretty much thriving alongside with its sister series, the Mario & Luigi games. But this is when things get a little bit weird for Paper Mario, because for the next entry, they decided to shake things up and decided to turn Paper Mario from an RPG game to a platformer with really light RPG mechanics. But despite the change of gameplay, it still had the same style and quirk of the previous games, but it was unfortunately bogged down with painfully simple platforming. It's still a good game, but I wouldn't say it's truly great. However, the Paper Mario series eventually got even more rough once it jumped to the 3DS. I felt like I was making a Sonic video making that sentence. But anyway, Paper Mario Sticker Star. Now with this, it was pretty much a soft reboot of the series, where they made a oversimplified Paper Mario game, and instead of it being a turn-based RPG, it was a turn-based resource management game. With its really bad pacing, its laughably bad puzzles, as well as its unoriginal characters, this was definitely one of the most negative received Mario games in the series. And by the power of bullshit, for some reason, critics gave this game a pretty positive review score with 7 and 8, which was honestly really new to me because usually when it comes to review scores, they are mostly unbiased. But on the brighter note, after release of Sticker Star, the series has slowly gotten better over the years. With Color Splash, well yeah, it's basically Sticker Star 2, I had a really good time playing this game, and Origami King was honestly a really great time, with one of the most interesting Mario stories in the series. But the problem is that even though that I think these two games are still good, they clearly show a lack of understanding what made Paper Mario appealing. Because again, this was a spiritual successor to Super Mario RPG. As it tried to expand the Mario world, while post Sticker Star made everything very small in scale. With its big replacement is the focus on the paper side, even though it was more of a stylistic choice, not a focal point. And the reaction by fans ended up being very unbearable over the years, to the point where it was pretty much a big old blame game wanting multiple people to get fired. But starting with the year 2023, the Mario series began to change to a brand new era with the release of the Super Mario Bros. Movie, which made Mario the biggest non-Disney animated movie of all time, and because of this, Nintendo really tried to capitalize on the hype with not only making one of the most unique 2D Mario games of all time, but bringing back different spin-offs left and right. Basically trying to reintroduce some certain games to a new audience. With them remaking the original Super Mario RPG, them reviving Mario vs. Donkey Kong, and even bringing a brand new spin-off with Peach. This was definitely the best time to be a Mario fan, but during the hype of Super Mario RPG, Nintendo did something that no one could ever see coming, which was a full-fledged remake of Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. Like, Super Mario RPG was already a miracle, but we're getting two beloved Mario RPG remakes back to back like that, which was honestly very something incredible, and 8 months later, it finally released. So I thought it'd be just fun to really talk about this game since it's fresh in a lot of people's minds. Now, I already made a video on Thousand Year Door about 2 years ago, but that was when I started out making videos on YouTube. I actually wanted to revisit some old games, so I thought it would be a perfect time to do so. Now, this is a game I grew up with for many years, as I got when GameCube games were still on the market in its stores, and one day with my mom, I went to Circuit City and we saw this game on shelf and picked it up. And when I got home and finally played it, I honestly really sucked at it. This was the first time I ever played an RPG, because The other Mario games I played, all you had to do was just run and explore, and when you attack an enemy, you just jump and they just go down, so seeing a turn-based battle was basically something new for me. The only other game at the time I could think of that did this was Super Mario RPG, which was another game I grew up with via the Virtual Console. But over the years, after I played a lot of other RPGs, I grew to really love Paper Mario Thousand Year Door, and I cannot wait to talk about this game again. But before we do so, I have to mention is that I'm going to be talking about this game entirely, so I'm going to give a big ol' spoiler warning for this game. I know this is a remake of a 20-year-old game, but a lot of people are playing this for the very first time, so it's mostly those who haven't played this game before. But with everything out of the way, let's get started. Okay, so this is something very cool. When you boot up the game on the Switch menu, you're greeted with the Nintendo Intelligent Systems logo, replicating the original startup of a lot of GameCube games. It's kind of weird seeing the more modern Nintendo logo greeting you on the boot up screen. Obviously for third-party devs they do this, but when it comes to Nintendo, they haven't done something like this in a really long time. Because with most Nintendo Switch games, when you try to boot up a game, it just immediately goes you to the menu. But anyways, so after that, we are greeted to the main title screen, and man, this caught me by surprise, as when you start the game, only Mario greets you on the screen. But the more you play through the game, the more characters are added onto the screen, so in the final ends of the game, your screen will look like this. Alright, so I think I rambled enough. So the story begins with that ever so iconic storybook, as it tells a story about an ancient city that was living peaceful life, until one day an evil has covered the town which caused it to sink into the depths of the earth. Years later, the people eventually built a new town over the remains of the old, called Rogueport, which still stands to this very day. But even after the destruction, the legacy of the old town still lives on via the rumors about a legendary treasure in the ancient ruins. Jumping to present day, Princess Peach then arrives at Rogueport taking a little vacation, where she's greeted by a mysterious woman that gives her a box that holds a map. She then sends it to Mario's house, and wow, I've gotta say, just seeing the classic house for the first time for so many years, and hearing that nostalgic N64 theme really sets me back. Anyway, so Mario receives the letter from Peach requesting him to find the treasure with her, and so he sets off to Rogueport. God damn, the nostalgia's kicking in. Alright, so as soon as Mario enters the harbor of the town, he immediately encounters trouble as this mysterious person named Lord Crumb is after a small little Goomba girl named Goombella. He tries to interrogate her about the location of the Crystal Stars, but luckily Mario is here to stop the fight, only for things to get worse as this guy has a literal army of goons. But luckily the two were able to slip through the ambush. And while they're out of trouble, they were able to greet each other. Where Mario learns is that Goombella is an archaeologist of Goomba University, who has been recently researching about the Crystal Stars, but with Mario's map, she's able to find— Oh hey, Toadsworth! I haven't seen you in a really long time. He came with Peach to Rogueport for a little vacation, but unfortunately he has no idea where she went. But he is really assuring that Mario is going to be able to find her, with the only clue that he has right now is the map she sent him. So Goombella then takes Mario to see Professor Frankly, an old teacher of hers, which leads them to the underground ruins, and within it they find the Thousand-Year Door, where suddenly the pedestal in front of the door suddenly activates when the map is nearby, where it begins to show a little image within the map, as it shows the location of the first Crystal Star within Petal Meadows. And assuming that Peach is probably nearby or something, Mario and Goombella then heads off to collect the Crystal Stars. But little does he know, Peach ended up getting kidnapped by a mysterious commander named Grodus, who is after the Crystal Stars because whatever is behind the Thousand-Year Door, he is going to use it to take over the world. With Peach slowly getting Mario information thanks to his nifty computer, but I'll talk about more of that later. So now it's up to Mario to gather up all the Crystal Stars before the Equinox does, and try to save both Peach and the world. The story of this game is very straightforward like the original, with it being a big treasure hunt, but that's fine because, as I mentioned from time and time again, with Paper Mario stories, it goes for an A plot and a B plot kind of thing. With the A plot being the big goal, which is trying to get the Crystal Stars before Grodus, and with the B plot being the ones within chapters. Because the Equinox aren't the only issue when it comes to trouble in these cities. The first chapter of this game is pretty much a replica of the N64 one, as you go through a grassy plain fighting through simple enemies before going to a Koopa village, where you can meet a lot of interesting characters like this little toad who's a big fan of Fire Emblem. There's this Koopa who is probably the second biggest Peach fanboy I've ever seen. The first one's obviously Bowser. And you get to meet a little Koopa named Koops, who is your second party member in this game, who wants to join Mario to find his long-lost dad in the castle. But in this giant fortress, you're not going to see an Ninja Turtle parody, but instead you're greeted by a giant dragon! This is Hooktail. She has been terrorizing the Koopas for many years and has the Crystal Star within her grasp, and for some reason seems to be obsessed with people sniffing her feet. As during her boss fight, she kept insisting to Mario to smell her feet. What? But after you defeat the Schneider Dragon, it was revealed that Koops' father was alive all along and was stuck within Hooktail's belly. As it turns out that he left town to try and take down Hooktail once for all, and he was almost successful for doing so, but she had one final trick up her sleeve and used the smell of feet to stun him. Someone, somewhere, had an awakening after this boss. But anyway, so once you get through the simple grass chapter out of the way, it's time to get all crazy with concepts. With the next one, we head to Boggly Woods, home to these cute little Pikmin-like creatures called Cunies, as their homes has been attacked by the Xnauts, and this is where you are introduced to even more characters called the Three Shadow Sisters, a group of Shadow Witches who are partners with the Xnauts, and their leader is Beldum, who is probably the biggest jackass you'll ever see in a Mario game, as her main persona is just bullying her little sister over stuff that is most likely her own fault. And as for Vivian, she is probably the most popular character in the Paper Mario series, heck, the most popular character in the Mario RPG series as a whole, as she was able to cameo in different games including Smash Bros. Spirit over the years. And fun fact, back in the day, me and my cousins used to give Vivian a nickname called Vivi the Friendly Ghost. So just for old time's sakes, I think I'm just gonna call her that. But anyway, so as soon as we head to Chapter 3, this is where we got even bigger stories, as you head to this giant floating island in the sky called Glitzville. As you sign up for this fighting tournament to win the Crystal Star, where you're able to meet a newly born Yoshi, which I named Junior for this video based on my adorable little cat here. Aww. As you are rivals with this jerk named Rawcock, who is the champion, and tries to sabotage your chance of winning, like giving you a poisonous cake and locking you up in an abandoned locker room, while you try to uncover the shady side of this arena that's trying to hide something secret. As throughout the game, you'll find these cryptic messages from a guy named X. Meanwhile, another anonymous person is trying to keep you away from finding the Crystal Star, where it's revealed that the manager of the place is trying to drain the life of all the fighters to make them young and powerful, as you discover the lifeless bodies of your fighting colleagues in the storage room. And as he reveals his true colors to Mario, he then transforms into this monstrous version of himself that Mario was able to take down with no problem. And this is where the twist comes in, where his assistant named Jolene was secretly guiding Mario this whole time, as she wants him to unveil the Glitz's true colors as a big trap for all the fighters. And the reason why she was able to know about this stuff is that her little brother named Prince Mush joined the tournament to help out his poor family. However, one day he suddenly disappeared, and assuming foul play, Jolene takes a job at the Glitz Pit, and her suspicions were proven correct as she was able to see Grubba transform into the monster. However, she lost all hope until Mario comes in to sign up for the tournament, and she knew that he would be the one to rescue her brother. But unfortunately, Prince Much died as Grubba drained all the life he had in him. But then suddenly, the Crystal Star started to activate and brought him back to life, finally putting an end on Grubba's power boost operation. And honestly, this is probably my favorite chapter in the game because I love the mysteries that this one holds, and the ending of this one was really heartwarming. But I know the most talked chapter in this game is easily Chapter 4. As you head to this gloomy area called Twilight Town, where you meet the town locals that are being turned into pigs by this mischievous shapeshifter named Douglas. As he lives in this haunted castle deep in the forest, who's mostly doing this because he's a big prankster. And while he's just chilling watching TV, Mario comes in to try to stop his annoying game, where he was able to take him down quickly, but this is when the biggest twist of the game comes in. As midway through the boss, he was able to swap places with Mario, stealing all of his partners, and turning Mario into this shadowy figure. But luckily when he heads to Twilight Town, Vivian's there trying to find a bomb that her sister has lost, with Mario being able to find it with ease, but unfortunately the bomb was broken, and while she doesn't know that she's helping Mario, Vivian decides to help him out after she finds out that someone stole his name and face. Which leads to a Rumpelstiltskin game with Dupless, where if Mario says his name, he'll lift the cursed. But even after as he learned his name, he then just simply chickens out as he runs back to his castle. And as soon as they were able to meet up again, Vivian then discovers that she was helping Mario out, but decides to continue helping him because he was the first person to be nice to her, and thanks to this, Dupless was able to go down, lifting the curse on Mario. Ending things off with another heartwarming ending. So yeah, the stories within these chapters are pretty enjoyable throughout. Even if some of them could be a bit more simpler than others, they are still pretty fun with a lot of quirky characters. I honestly like the characters you meet on this train because a lot of them are pretty memorable and you have to solve a mystery and just go through every room and just talk to them. And the partners you meet along the way are also really good and memorable. Like, Goomba is a really funny character that has a lot of funny comments of everyone in this game. Koops is a quirky and somewhat clumsy Koopa Troopa. Miss Mouser is a dashing thief who is specialized on stealing treasures like badges. Madame Flurry is a retired Hollywood star who resides in the quiet, peaceful woods. I already mentioned the baby Yoshi, who is honestly my favorite partner in the game because he is such a spunky gremlin and I love him. Vivi is a really nice and kind cinnamon bun that we all must protect. In Chapter 5, you are introduced by this hilarious, cowardly pirate named Flavio, who is really obsessed with this crystal skull. And at the end of Chapter 5, when Lord Crumb tries to ambush Mario, Flavio then blackmails a ghost pirate named Cortez by threatening to throw away the source of the ship's power into the ocean if Mario is unable to borrow the ship. And then in Chapter 6, you're introduced by Professor Pintington, a detective who thinks that Mario is Luigi. But I've got to say, out of all the characters in this game, the one I have to say that has the saddest story of them all has to be Admiral Bombery, who resents of going back into seas after he blames himself after the loss of his wife, as he wasn't there during her final hours, but learned to come into grips with it after reading her final note, which is frankly very touching. And as for the main villains, on the other hand, Lord Crumb is honestly my favorite one because he's just enough levels of very comedic, but also can be an opposing threat as well. Like in the aforementioned Chapter 5, he disguised himself as a rookie pirate, trying to blend in and even breaks the fourth wall at one point, before betraying them at the near end by this giant warship. And alongside with the three shadows who are pretty much the more sneaky characters in the game, especially when they add Dupless in the group after Vivian left them, with Beldum pretty much treating Dupless as much as she did with Vivian. And as for Grodus, honestly, even though he's the big overarching villain, I've got to say that I never really cared for him too much, as he's not really that interesting compared to the other characters. And besides the near end of the game, he never really felt threatening at all. Especially compared to the other Paper Mario villains from different games like Count Black, Dementio, or hell even King Ollie. I think it's mostly because throughout the game he mostly stands in one place. Now Count Black did this as well, but the difference is that you see him how powerful he is in the opening cutscene of the game. And while Grodus does have a big army, it really feels like Lord Crumb is the big leader of the X-Nauts. Mostly because he puts himself in the action as well. But even still, in general, I think the villains in this game are really good, and it's really good to see these characters after so many years. So for the gameplay. Since it's a remake of the Thousand Year Door, we're finally back at the original gameplay style from Paper Mario 64. While there being a few tweaks that are taken from the modern games. Mario controls pretty much the same as he does. He runs, jumps, uses hammer, and uses partner ability. Also, you can explore all these lands and solve certain puzzles. But as far as taking stuff from the more modern games, there are a few more quality of life improvements for the controls. In the original game, you can use Mario's hammer to smash certain objects. However, it was only limited by swinging it left and right, but in the remake, you have full 60 degrees on where you want to swing. It's only a simple new tweak in the grand scheme of things, but this easily makes the hammer swing feel a lot more fluent. And another thing too is that if you get lost in a certain area of the game, Goombella will try and help you by giving you a hint, even if she's not active during the gameplay. And returning from Paper Mario 64 is the character wheel. This simple new feature makes changing partners a lot more faster than the original game. And each of the partners in this game have their own special abilities. Like Goombella, for example, knows a lot about stuff, so she'll explain to you about the location or certain characters. For Koops, you use him as a bit of a long-range attack. Whether it's trying to flip a switch or grab an item, Koops is very effective with this. And as for Flori, she uses the power of blowing to uncover hidden objects. Like if you see a hanging paper in the air, it's most likely a secret passage or something. Now with Yoshi Kid, Mario can ride on top of him to go a lot faster and do a small flutter jump. Basically kind of like a much more faster parry carry. And as for Vivian, we'll use her to hide Mario underground against enemies or trying to go through a secret passage. And for Admiral Bombery, he's a bomb. And bombs explode. And as for the final character, Ms. Mouse, she's basically used to detect if there's any secrets in certain rooms, so she's pretty much the completion cleanup character. Honestly, even though like a lot of these are pretty much reused from Paper Mario 64, I think a lot of these abilities are pretty nifty throughout. And thanks to the remake, some of the characters feel a lot better as well, like Vivian for example, feels a bit more snappy than the original. Same with the paper transformations as well. So throughout the game, you'll find a black chest that requires a black key. And by opening it, you free a demon that will immediately put a curse on Mario on these horrifying new forms. Like this horrendous paper airplane that allows you to glide through the air. A terrifying paper flip that makes Mario be able to go through narrow areas. A painful looking roll form that turns Mario into a burrito. And the anxiety-inducing boat form that makes Mario go through these treacherous waters. Which makes me worried because he might get eaten by the piranhas because for some reason in Rogueport, there are freaking piranhas everywhere. Like again, for the town itself, the waters could be a bit dangerous. There's something very funny seeing Mario jump into a fountain and then suddenly a piranha. Or jumping into the pool since it's currently June right now, and then suddenly get greeted by a piranha. But going back to Rogueport, this is essentially your main hub area as it's the center point of the entire location. And it's such an interesting contrast compared to the Toad Towns in other Paper Mario games. As with those that had such a bright and welcoming feel to it, but here we're in a much more run-down town full of crooks. I mean, the moment Mario enters the location, he encounters trouble with this organization. When Mario talks to Goombella, you see a fighting going on in the background. And the moment Mario enters a different location, he immediately gets robbed. There's a section of the game where in order to proceed, you need to strike a deal with the Mafia. And the freaking centerpiece of this town is a noose. But this is only for the surface level because underneath Rogueport holds a big mystery. As there's an interesting labyrinth underneath that has ruins of an old town that people made homes out of. And while you explore, you can find various collectibles like badges which gives Mario or his partners certain boosts like being able to deal stronger attacks for example. Now since this is an RPG, you don't really upgrade Mario's attack power by leveling up. But instead, you can find special variants of like the Super and Ultra shoes and hammers. And with these, you can do even more moves for Mario like doing a simple ground pound or grabbing on poles, or doing a much more powerful hammer swing. Also, you can unlock various things like these little star pieces, which are pretty much rare currency. But in the remake, if you collect them all in each world, you'll unlock special concept art for that location. And some of these are pretty damn interesting that we've never seen before, like early ideas for characters like Dupless or the Three Shadows. Honestly, looking at this concept art, I kinda wish they kept some of the details like their respected elements being represented by the tip of their hats. I think something like that would give a character like Vivi a better emphasis of being a fire mage, for example. But besides those, there's also the rare Shine sprites you can find that's also been modified, so if you collect them all, you unlock some soundtracks in the area. But more importantly, they're used as currency to upgrade your partners for better health, strength, and other moves for battling. Which leads to probably the best thing about this remake, the return of the battle system. Gone from the weird resource management and weird turn-based mechanic, Paper Mario is finally back to the original gameplay of being a turn-based RPG, where Mario is able to use his jump and hammer to attack enemies while guarding against them, while getting aided by the various partners that Mario has with him, like Goombella being the one that can tell you about the stats of the enemies. Koops is very useful for his high defense and being able to attack multiple enemies at once. Flori, I'll be honest, with her and Miss Mouse, I never really used turn battle at all, especially compared to Yoshi Kid and Vivi. With Yoshi, he has this very effective move where he can grab onto an enemy within his mouth and spit him against the other one. Not only this deals a lot of good damage, but also pierces through characters' defense. And because of this, I was able to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And as for Vivian, she's probably the most OP character in the game. Her neutral attack is very strong as it's essentially a fire punch, which not only deals a good amount of damage, but also causes an after effect with the enemy being on fire. And Fiery Jings is like that, but even more powerful, as not only it deals a good amount of damage, but also attacks every enemy on screen and pierces through their defense, which is very useful if you're trying to rank up on those star points, which are basically the EXP of the game, as every time you get 100, you'll level up, where you can choose either 5 health points, 5 flower points, or 3 badge points. Personally, I choose a even amount as I just go through health, flower, and badge, although after I get at least 18 badge points, I'm mostly focusing on upgrading the health and flower points. And it's always very satisfying to get a good chunk of star points, doubly so if you have a little fortune teller with you that can double your amount, which allows you to level up even faster and hear that audience cheer. Which is very important gameplay wise because, as you can see by the footage, the battles are set up like a stage play. And it's not just for show, because the audience does play an important gameplay factor too, which is one of the main moves Mario can use, which are the crystal stars themselves, as each of them have a unique ability that can either aid Mario or attack different opponents. Like the first one, for example, is that you have to time your buttons just right to charge the crystal star, and when you unleash it, it causes a big earthquake. There's one where you have to draw a circle around the enemies, which really makes me think of Sonic Frontiers for some reason. But if you want some abilities that can help Mario specifically, there's one that allows Mario to heal a good amount of health back, or this one that can boost Mario's attack and defense. They give you a great amount of options, but you have to choose wisely because it consumes a lot of your star power. So while you attack, it's best to put on a good show by pressing A by the right time, which allows your party to do a cool little pose. The more the audience cheers, the more star points you'll get. And then there's stuff that can happen randomly, like a bingo machine showing up that allows you to refill your health. There's this fog machine on stage that can malfunction sometimes that allows you to freeze your enemies. Sometimes an audience member can throw something at Mario that can either help him or damage him. And then sometimes the actual stage pops can affect you if they fall on top of you. But lucky you can defend yourself throughout, as you have a special guard button, which reduces the damage you'll take, but only in Thousand Year Door introduces another type of guard called a super guard, which allows you to deal no damage and sometimes allows you to counterattack the enemies. But the timing on these are a bit more strict than the regular guarding, so there's a bit of a risk and reward factor to this one. Especially if you're going against the various bosses in the game, which are very giant and imposing. I mean, with Hooktail, she can barely even fit on stage, and while on the verge of being defeated, she then starts eating half the audience member to refill her health. Which, I'll be honest, it's kind of funny seeing people play this game for the first time and see stuff like this. I always like the bosses that interact with the stage set itself. Like how when you're transitioning to different phases of the Cortez boss, the curtains will cover up the theater and change set like you're doing a different play. Or with the final Lord Chrome boss fight, his final attack is using a vacuum and sucking up the audience, and then launching at Mario like it was that one episode from SpongeBob. But overall, the battle system in this game is still great and holds up really well to this very day. So Nintendo, please for the love of Christ, for the next game, do not change the battle system again. Alright, so now it's time to talk about stuff specifically for the remake, like the refreshments on the story. Because when I first saw this game, I thought it was just going to be a simple bit-by-bit remake, but instead we got a bit more of a retextualization of the original story. For one, the dialogue in this game is not just a simple copy and paste from the original, as it basically combines the North American localization with the Japanese original. I know some people were being a bit over-exaggerated with the changes, like claiming Nintendo was doing some censorship. I remember the biggest contender of this claim was the scene where the Goombas were catcalling Goombella in the original version, which, I'll be honest, I don't really see the big deal about this change. I mean, yeah, they're villains, but I'm not gonna call the entire remake bad just because of one-off line change, in a game where there are dozens of dialogue changes. I mean, the scene where the three Shadows were introducing themselves to Mario was toned down, so instead of Beldum snapping at Vivian by not getting their title right and calling her ugly, she snaps her in the remake for not making their group sound mysterious because she added the word sister to the title. Which leads me to the biggest factor of this remake's relocalization. So as I mentioned earlier, Vivi the Friendly Ghost was once part of the group of the Three Shadows, but she was always casted out by her older sister, but in the Japanese version, it had a bit more of a darker type of bullying, as originally Vivian was labeled as a transgender, who states that she is a female, but Beldum bullies her because of this, and just straight up call her a man, which really gives her much more of a transphobic side, to the point where she became pretty much the mascot for transphobic in the Nintendo community. which is always funny to see, as every time you see a transphobic post, people just spam Beldum in the replies. But in the Nintendo Switch remake, it was reverted back to the Japanese version, where Vivi is a trans woman. Which is honestly really cool to see, because after so many years in this weird localization limbo, it's really cool to see this aspect in the North American version. And even beyond that, there are even small details and big ones, like the environment being a lot more interactive with Mario's hammer. Like when you do a hammer spin, the hammer will this time have impact on the wall. And the best part, carried from the newer games, is that you can actually attack NPCs. Yes, everyone will react to your hammer, like the residents, the wealth, your partners, and even your brother. And yes, it even works on the transphobe. Smacky, smacky, smack the phobe, doo-dah, doo-dah. Smacky, smacky, smack the phobe, oh, fuck your phobe. So with the original version of Thousand Year Door, the biggest criticism with that game was the backtracking. And I'm happy to say that in the remake, they mostly fixed the entirety of the problem. For one, the fast traveling system has been greatly overhauled in this game, so instead of having to go through these different narrows just to go through the fast travel, once you find it, all the warp heights that lead you to the different areas of the game will be in one place. And you're allowed to access that pipe if you complete that chapter. They even add an additional warp pipe that leads you right on top of Rogueport, so you don't have to go through different rooms underneath the ground. This makes stuff like the Chapter 7 backtracking a hell of a lot easier to go through. And yes, they fixed Chapter 4. Because in the original, it was bogged down by multiple backtracking as you had to go left and right multiple times. They added one single warp pipe that single-handedly fixed this chapter for me, and now I really adore this chapter now. Yes, I really mean it. This simple new addition made me enjoy Chapter 4 a lot. Now don't get me wrong, there are still a bit of backtracking in this game still, specifically for Chapter 5 for example, but even still, they had ways to modify it to make things a bit more easier to navigate through. So now, after all these years, I can say that the pacing for Thousand Year Door has been improved greatly in this remake. So if you want to take a break of doing the main quests, there are some optional side quests you can go through in this game, where they're all mostly located in the Trouble Center, which has tons of different mini quests you can go through in this game by helping out a certain person. Whether it's trying to find a certain item for someone or trying to do some errands, this place will definitely make you busy. With my favorite one being this one, where you have to wear a special Luigi skin to trick this girl into thinking she's meeting Luigi. The funniest thing too is the real Luigi shows up, but she thinks that Luigi is an imposter, and pretty much just telling the scram, which is kind of funny to see, especially when Mario's just standing there not even thinking of helping his brother out. And funniest thing too is that while Mario's going on his adventure, Luigi has his own journey throughout, where he discusses his various adventures during the Waffle Kingdom, as he even has his own partners tagging along with him, although they really hate his guts. I mean, how apparently he fried this blooper alive by accident. I honestly recommend reading out Luigi's journey. Whether if you believe him or not is all up to you. Other than that, there's also the Pit of 100 Trials, which is pretty much a duration test, as you go through 100 floors facing a bunch of enemies within one go, ending things off with a giant fight against a dragon! And finally, after you beat Chapter 3, you can actually re-enter the Glitz Pit. When you re-enter, you need to start from scratch, but it's really fun to go through this area again. Because what I liked about the Glitz Pit is that in order to proceed through the rankings, you have to battle the enemies while having a small criteria, whether it's not using your jump, trying to use your special attacks, or having the enemy damage you multiple times before you can attack them. In addition to the remake, they added one brand new boss in this game, who might be probably the hardest boss in the game depending on how well you've mastered super guarding. Because if you don't, you'll probably fail this boss fight because he deals so much damage, it's honestly insane. So I highly recommend using this practice toad as training. Oh, and there's also this whack-a boss fight as well. I didn't really beat it yet, but all I can say is that it looks pretty cool. And finally, the last thing I can think of are these small little Pianta minigames that pretty much take advantage of the various paper transformations. It's honestly pretty cute and harmless, and I recommend trying them out if you're very curious. Plus, it's just more additional content in this really meaty game. So for the presentation, holy crap, this looks phenomenal. Even though the Switch is at the near end of its life, Nintendo still pulls out really impressive graphics. And the Thousand Year Door remake is no exception, because my god, this is easily the best looking Paper Mario game in the series. There is just so much detail in this world now, it is honestly insane. And even the character designs in this game are reverted back to the more classic approach, where instead of being sprite-based, it's a lot more rig-based, so you have smoother animations. And as for the white outline people were constantly talking about, well, it wasn't necessarily removed, but more so reworked. So instead of it being an entire bold outline around the characters, it is more so a shader for them, which honestly looks really good, especially with the renderings in this game. I also adore how expressive everyone is in this game. In the original game, a lot of them have like this simple stock animation, but here the characters are more alive than ever. They aren't stuck with this small rigid expression because they actually have more emotion to them. I also like the dialogue in this game even more because each of the characters have their own type of gibberish. Like, they literally turn Luigi's voice into something you would see in Undertale. And speaking of Undertale, is it me or does the focus of Twilight sound like Sans? And I love this detail. With the magical map, when you start out the game, it is completely blank without any color, but the more you progress through the game, the more color is added into the map. And it honestly enhances a lot of the story aspects in this game. It may not sound a lot, but it really does give you a good sense of progression. And also carried from Origami King is that every single chapter in this game have their unique battle lead motif. So instead of the original where they play the same song over and over again throughout the battles, each time you go to a new area, it constantly changes. And this leads me to the soundtrack. This may be a bit of a controversial take, but I never really cared about the original soundtrack of Thousand Year Door. Like, it was good music, don't get me wrong, there were a few handful of tracks I really liked, but overall, I really didn't think it was that remarkable. But in the remake is a different story because, wow, what a glow up, because I really adore a lot of these remixes. And the best part too is that they even added even more music to this game, with every partner having their own theme, and even adding more music to certain scenes in the game. Like this scene, for example, where Grubba was revealed to be the mastermind behind the disappearance of certain fighters. In the original version, he had this simple expression as the music just goes silent. But in the remake, the music changes to a lot more urgency tone, as Grubba is a lot more shocked, scared, and angry because he was busted. The only issue with the presentation in this game I could think of was the whole thing about this game being in 30 FPS. And yeah, I kind of agree that going from 60 FPS from the original to 30 is a bit of a downgrade. But it's one of those things is that once you play it, you'll probably get used to it. Obviously, I would prefer 60, but 30 isn't really a deal breaker for me. And for those who prefer the original soundtrack, you can actually choose to play the original songs in this game. All you need to do is just go into this little badge shop and just buy the GameCube badge. It only costs you 1 coin, and once you do, you can have the entire soundtrack of the GameCube version. But overall, the presentation of this game is easily one of the best for the Nintendo Switch, and easily the best one for intelligent systems in general. Alright, so throughout the video, you have noticed that I've left out 2 certain characters in this game, because I wanted to talk about these at the near end before we head to the final parts of the game. So every time you claim a crystal star and end the chapter, you are greeted to 2 interlude seeds, where it focuses on small stories with Bowser and Peach. So after getting informed that Peach was kidnapped by the X-Nauts, Bowser then heads to Rogueport to go find her, because no one gets to kidnap her but Bowser. And then hilarious shenanigans happen with Bowser throughout. Like when he heads to the Koopa village, he mistakenly thought the poster was actually Peach herself. So when this Koopa grabs his poster and heads back to his house, Bowser ends up being humiliated because he was just talking to a poster. And even calling himself the king who talks to posters. And then there's these cool little sections where you're controlling Bowser in this small 2D platformer place, similar to Super Mario Bros. These sections are mostly funny because it's very hilarious seeing Bowser in these weird situations. He's trying to get the Crystal Stars as well, but Mario's always there before him. And so, at the near end of the game, when he finally thought he found a Crystal Star, it was revealed to be a fake and Mario was able to get them all. When Bowser found this out, he then heads straight down to the 1,000-year door and tried to stop Mario once and for all. But as for Peach, she has a bit more of an interesting story for her. Because during her stay in the X-Naut Fortress, the system's computer lured her out of her room and enters the main computer room. This is Tech, the main computer and the brains of the entire facility. He is programmed to be the ultimate software and the big tool for their big operation. But once they captured Peach and she was trapped within the facility, something within Tech changed. As he slowly becomes sentient and develops emotions where he slowly falls in love with Peach. As a computer that wants to know all about knowledge, he does not know about what love is, and believes that Peach would be the key to that. With them even dancing a little with Tech representing the hologram. And soon enough, Tech then eventually revolts against their masters as he helps out Peach sneak across the areas to gather up information from Mario. So when Peach knows where to go, he would use the computer as a small email from Mario. And with this, it was pretty much a callback to the Paper Mario 64 as well, where in that, you're pretty much exploring the castle and trying to find information as well. I mean, with this, you're pretty much mixing various ingredients together to make a small little potion. And honestly, these sections are pretty nice, especially since you get more of the story. With the reason why Grodus wants to go through the 1,000-year door is to awake an ancient demon to take over the world. And the reason why Peach is here is because she is the key to her revival. Tech figured out an idea for an escape route for Peach, but Grody has found out about the mutiny, and so he has a new alternative plan since Mario has most of the Crystal Stars. And so he then shuts down Tech and then heads to the Palace of Shadows. And once Mario was able to defeat Lord Crump once and for all, he was able to gather the last Crystal Star and head down to the lab where he meets with Tech. He explains to Mario where Grodus and Peach went to, and so he sends Mario through the teleporter back to the underground of Rogueport. Alright, so with every Crystal Star in hand, it's time to open the 1,000-year door. Alright, so we are here, the Palace of Shadows, and this is pretty much the final big gauntlet area, as it's one final big testing ground for all the moves you learned along the way. Fighting a bunch of enemies, going through the various puzzles, and taking full advantage of all your partner's abilities before fighting a giant dragon! You even have one final fight against the 3 shadows. This chapter really does feel like a big finale, as once you finally pass the test and went through the entirety of the palace, you are only meted with Grodus. Being fed up of constantly losing to Mario, he decides to fight him himself, which leads to another boss fight with Grodus, where after you try to defeat him, he has one final trick on his sleeve and threatens to straight up kill Peach if Mario doesn't surrender. But suddenly Bowser appears right in the middle of the fight, and when he realizes that Mario and Peach are here, he decides to fight Mario so he can capture Peach once and for all. where he and Kamei pretty much get the mop floored on them. But while Mario was fighting Bowser, Grodus escaped deeper inside the palace, and so Mario goes after him, where he's led even deeper into the palace, where into a small little room with a coffin. As Mario is too late, and Grodus is ready to summon the Shadow Queen. The Shadow Queen has been awoken, but her form is not complete, as she needs a physical host to manifest into, that way she can have her full power. And this is why Peach is here, because she's going to be the host for the Shadow Queen. And just like that, she then merges into Peach and becoming one big entity. Grodus' plan has finally been complete, but there was one big issue with his thing. Because when Grodus demands the Shadow Queen to take out Mario, she then refuses and tell him that she is the master now, right before just straight up killing him. And this is where the three shadows come in, because it's revealed that Beldam tricked Grodus this entire time of waking the demon, as she was the one that created the myth of the treasure this entire time. And now with the Shadow Queen reborn, she's going to plan to take the entire world into darkness. But Mario's not going to let that happen, and now it's time for the final battle. And with a really interesting twist, Peach this time is the final boss, with her first phase being pretty much on the easy side until she decides to reveal her true form, where she becomes full-on invincible. All hope seems lost, especially since she devours the entirety of the audience before you. All hope seems lost until the Crystal Stars begins to react. The Crystal Stars scattered across the land to the various towns that Mario helped along the way, where they all cheer for Mario to stop this entity once and for all. And just for a brief moment, Peach was able to break free of the Shadow Queen's possession, as she was able to heal Mario and his partner for one final battle. And man, this definitely feels like a true-on finale. With the sinister atmosphere of everything, this definitely feels like a good send-off of this game. And once you finally struck that final blow, the Shadow Queen has been slayed. The evil within Rogueport has been finally put to rest, as Peach was able to regain control of her body, and after that crazy adventure, it's time for them to head home, where all of Mario's partners then tell him a big ol' farewell, before Mario, Peach, and Toadsworth depart back to the Mushroom Kingdom, with Mario and Luigi just chilling out at the house discussing what happened on their adventures, as the people of Rogueport are now living on their new happy lives, with Goombella now working for Professor Frankly, Koops is planning on becoming the mayor of Petalburg, Flora decides to come out of retirement and become an actress once more with Dupless. Yoshika decides to come back to the Glitz Pit to become a champion. Vivian now lives peacefully for her now sisters who had decided to become reformed. Admiral Bonnery decides to take Flora to the seas once more. Ms. Mouse is working peacefully at her local bad shop. Turns out that Grodus survived the Shadow Queen's encounter, but now is just ahead. So now he's just residing in a local town right next to Crump. And luckily, Tech was able to survive that explosion, and is very eager to see Peach again. And speaking of which, Peach then arrives at Mario's house saying that she found another treasure map, and asks Mario to head out with her to find the treasure. Concluding, Paint Mario the Thousand-Year Door. And overall, holy shit, this remake is freaking amazing. Honestly, one of the best remakes I've ever played from a Nintendo game. It greatly enhances the presentation, it greatly enhances the story with refined dialogue and music, and it makes so much improvements to the gameplay. Honestly, for years, I've been one of those people who prefer Paint Mario 64 over Thousand Year Door, But with the improved pacing, the phenomenal remixes, I think I can say that the Thousand Year Door remake is now my favorite Paper Mario game. I mean, this game is just full of content and great story, it's honestly wild. If you're very curious on what made Paper Mario originally beloved in the first place, I highly recommend trying out the remake, because this is definitely one of Mario's greatest adventures yet. And I'm really glad to add this to the library of amazing Mario games. And before we wrap things up, I've gotta really say something real quick. I really hope that this remake sells really well, because if it does, we can finally get a third traditional Paper Mario RPG game. We're probably not going to be seeing Mario until half a decade later, but with how great this remake is, I am very curious on what this series is going to do forward. And also I'd like to say a big thank you for 1,000 subscribers. I've been working very hard for these various videos, and I'm really glad that it's getting paid off. Which is why I decided to do a full-on in-depth video on Thousand Year Door again, as a 1,000 subscriber special. Because I really enjoy making videos like these, just talking about my personal thoughts on certain games. It took me a really long time to figure out what I should do with this channel, and I think after a few years, I finally found my footing. So I hope you guys have a really good summer, and thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye!